Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Connecting the Dots, a podcast series hosted by 49 Marketing. Today, I am joined by the enigmatic, the wonderful, the badass branding aficionado herself, Claire Baker. Claire, welcome to the podcast.
Hey Neil, good to be here, mate.
Claire is here today to give her branding tips for small businesses, and it's a unique milestone today for you, isn't it, Claire? It's your first ever podcast.
It sure is.
And how would you rate my introduction there? Scale of 1 to 10?
I reckon that's a 10, mate. I'll give you a hard 10 on that.
You happy with that?
Yeah, really happy.
I was really thinking about the description, and badass branding aficionado just came to me towards the end, and I was like, I've got to get that in. So I'm glad you liked it. So I always start these podcasts with a bit about the guest's background and how that translates to where they are now. So Claire, I'm really curious, how did you first get into design, and what's your journey been like ever since?
Oh my God, it's been a roller coaster, mate. It's been a long journey. So if we go back to when I was growing up, when I was at school, I was only interested in two things, and that was art and English. And obviously those two things have come to, put me in good stead for the rest of my career. But at the time that I was at school, which was in the 80s, I know I'm that old, the careers officers didn't really push you to take a career in artistic endeavours, because back in those days, you had to do a proper job.
Mm-hmm.
And graphic design wasn't really a thing, and it certainly wasn't on my radar. It wasn't something that I was aware of at all. And so what happened was when I left school, I went and did a couple of dead-end jobs before I realised that wasn't really what I wanted to do with my life. And I had my daughter when I was very young. I was only 20. And it was actually having her that made me realise I needed to do a proper job. I needed a career, not just a dead-end job that wasn't going to get me anywhere. I wanted to make proper money. I wanted to achieve something with my life, and feel like I needed a purpose. I needed something to drive myself towards. And so at the time when my daughter was little, what I was doing was I was painting. I've always drawn and painted, and back then I was painting. I was doing watercolors, mostly under the light of a daylight bulb at night when my daughter was sleeping, because I couldn't do shit all in the day, because obviously I had a small baby on my hands. And these watercolors, I was selling them. A mate of mine had a shop in the town. We lived in a seaside town, and a mate of mine had a shop, and I was doing these paintings, and I couldn't paint them fast enough because they were selling like hotcakes in her shop window. And then one day somebody said to me, "Claire, have you ever thought about going to art college? You're really good at this art thing." And at that moment I was like, yeah, I'll go to art college. It was just literally like that, right? So at that time I still, graphic design still wasn't on my radar, but art was. So I basically went back to the local community college and did art A-level as a mature student. Lol, I was only 22, but I was classed as a mature student.
Yeah.
And I did an art A-level in a year rather than 2 years. Really got down to business, because by this time I'd decided I want to go through, progress myself and get somewhere with this. So I did an art A-level in a year, and then I applied to go to the local tech to do a 2-year art and design foundation course. And funny story, I turned up there with lugging this great big portfolio with all my work in it. And in the interview, they were looking at my work, and they weren't really saying anything, and it didn't feel like it was going very well. And then they suddenly said to me, "Look, we don't really think this is the course for you. Bear with us a minute. We're just going to go and get someone else."
Yeah.
And they go off and they bring this geezer in, and he's the course leader for the graphic design course. And he looks at my work and he's like, "You've got a place. You start in September." And I was like, "What?"
Yeah.
I said, "Can I ask you something?" He said, "Yeah, sure." I said, "What the fuck is graphic design?" Because I had no idea what it was, right? So I said, can you show me what it is? So he took me and he toured me around it was a 2-year course, and he toured me around the studio so I could see the students' work. And I saw the work, And it literally was like a eureka moment for me, because I just went, oh my God, yes, this is what I want to do. And so I did that course, which was a 2-year national diploma in graphic design. And then it was a natural progression for me to then go on to higher education. And I was then applying for degree courses, and I looked at the time I was in Devon, and I'd always wanted to go to London. London was a thing for me. I really wanted to do it. And I knew if I wanted to make it in the creative industry and wanted to be a graphic designer, London was the place for me, right?
Yeah.
And let's not pussyfoot around. I wasn't doing this because I fancied it. I was doing this because I wanted a career and I had a child to support. So I was so motivated and so driven to just get on, do it, get the education done and dusted, and get my career off the ground. So I then, another story, I applied to go to Croydon College, which was at the time, I don't know where it stands now, but at the time it was very high on the list of the best places to go to do graphic design in the UK. And, you know, the School of Art and Design at Croydon College has got some history. Malcolm McLaren went there, David Barry went there.
Oh.
I mean, some incredible people have been to that college, right? To the art and design part. And so, you know, I wanted to add my name to that list. And it was a scary time, because 5 people on my course applied to go to that college, and one by one they got rejection letters.
Yeah.
And I still hadn't heard. And every day I was going into college and they were saying to me, have you heard? Have you heard? And I was like, no, I haven't heard anything. Like, oh my God. Anyway, the reason I hadn't heard was because I'd got in and they were sending out the acceptance letters last.
Amazing.
So when I finally found out that I'd got in, I was like, yes, this is it now. So I basically went to Croydon College. I did 3 years there. I did a degree in graphic design. And I was very, very lucky, because I'm really big in Croydon College up here, because they're amazing, right?
Yeah.
They have the best links with the design industry. They have, you know, people who are genuinely interested in helping young designers to get off the ground, and really great links with the industry. So my career kicked off big time. We had our degree show in London. I was headhunted from my degree show, and I had 2 job offers immediately. It was absolutely, it was incredible, absolutely incredible. And, you know, to begin with, I cut my teeth, my corporate identity teeth, at the amazing global agency Coley Porter Bell.
Okay.
And they're one of the widely known branding agencies. They're absolutely incredible. And as a junior, I was there working on the British Gas account, which was a massive deal for me.
A big deal.
Because at the time, I already knew that branding was going to be my thing, right? So I'd already specialised in branding during the course of my degree. I'd done my final project, was a branding project. I actually rebranded BA as my final project. Big ambitions. And so, Coley Porter Bell, and then I basically moved around, went to a few different agencies to work my way up the career ladder, if you like. So I went from junior designer to middleweight to senior, and then eventually, my last role as an employee, I was working for a design agency in London called Associate Design, and around the time of 9/11, one of our biggest clients was BA. So that dream I had earlier actually came true. Brand them, but I did get to work on their account. So at the time, one of our clients was BA, and they basically, after 9/11, people weren't flying to the States. People weren't flying from the States. So they were cutting back their budgets and we lost them as a client.
Wow.
Because we weren't a big agency and I was the last one in, I was the first one out. So
Yeah.
unfortunately, I was made redundant. But I say unfortunately, it wasn't actually unfortunate because then I went self-employed. Okay,
Yeah.
that was the push that I needed to take my career and my experience to the next level.
Yeah.
So I then went out and started freelancing. And I worked for some absolutely incredible agencies,
Mm.
mostly in central London, and working on, client accounts that you could, most designers couldn't dream of working on. I got to work on EA Games, Momentum Pictures, 20th Century Fox, Orange, Jamie Oliver. I mean, some of the brands that I've worked on have been, it's been an amazing experience. It's been a hell of a ride.
Yeah.
But I actually like working with smaller companies because you don't have that. A large company's already got everything in place, right? They've
Mm.
already got they've got their brand guidelines. They know who they are. They know what they're doing.
Yeah.
You're just following along with what's been done before. Whereas with a new company, you're starting from scratch with the founders and
Yeah.
you're helping them. And I love that. I get a lot of pleasure out of doing that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I've actually just made a little note there to use that as a short for LinkedIn, because I think what you just said there is absolutely amazing. And God, you've worked with some incredible companies, but as you said, I love what you said there. Even despite having worked with companies of that scale, you still love working with SMEs and kind of helping them build themselves from the ground up. And my dad uses a phrase quite a lot, which I now use, which is "you're growing with the business." I quite like that idea because if you're working with a huge conglomerate or something, they've kind of done a lot of growth already, and there's not really an awful lot more you can do to help them. Whereas I feel like with a smaller company, you can really see the impact and the results of what you're doing. So that's why I love what you said there.
Yeah.
That was a great answer, by the way. I know you were quite skeptical before this about being on a podcast, but it sounded like you've been on 100 podcasts with that answer. So that was really good. So tying in with so the title of this podcast, branding tips for small businesses. What steps should small businesses take before they even think about refining their branding? Because you've written a blog post about this, which I'll link to in the description. It's brilliant. I think there's loads of good insights in there. So I guess it's a case of just breaking that down and expanding on that in this podcast. So yeah, what steps should businesses take before they go to that step of updating their branding?
Okay, so the first thing is they need to know who they are and what for, right? Because a lot of companies race into branding when they haven't actually really planned or thought out their business. So, without meaning to sound condescending, because I absolutely don't want to, but I do like to say it as it is, a lot of companies will have an idea for a business and then they just want to get on with it. They don't do any planning, there's no business plan, there's no nothing, right? And my advice to startups is that how can you tell the world what it is you do if you don't know what that is yourself, right? It's that simple, yeah? I'm not going to use loads of branding jargon because I don't want to confuse people, because the term branding itself, I know we're going to probably come to that in a minute, is just so confusing to people.
Yeah.
But before when somebody starts a business, the most important thing that they should have, first and foremost, is passion, right? They've got to feel passionate about what it is that they're actually going to do. Because if they're not, they're going to fall at the first hurdle. Because when you're having, it's hard building a business. And when you're having the shit days, if you haven't got that passion, you've got no momentum, you've got nothing to carry you forward.
Mm-hmm.
So the passion is the most important thing, right? Then it's purpose, okay? Purpose is hugely important. And most startups don't even have a purpose, right? It's not something they even think about. Why are you in business other than to make a profit? It's that simple, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Why do you exist? And the thing is, purpose-led businesses, it's been proven from studies of businesses that do have purpose and those that don't. Businesses that have a purpose are so much more successful, particularly now, because people buy into companies who know who they are, right? And if that is clear, it's an awful lot easier to communicate it outwardly to the world, right? So purpose and passion, they need to know what it is that they're offering, right? And what makes them different. Because look, I've said this, I think I've written this actually in a blog. I don't give a shit if you're selling, socks, sandals, or sex toys. Whatever it is you're selling needs a difference, because if you don't have that, in a market full of other people selling those products, how are you going to stand out, right? So what is it about your service or your product that's different to others? Yeah. That's really, really important. I can't stress enough how important that is. And it's something that people don't give enough thought to. I'm going to go back to the business plan a minute, because the first question that I ask an SME is, where's your business plan? Please, can I see it? Right? Because the whole point of branding is to align, the process of branding I'm talking about is to align your vision for your business, what you want to achieve with your business, with your plans for your business, right? So if you don't have a plan, how the fuck am I going to align it? Yeah. But not only that, how the fuck are you going to actually grow it if you don't have a plan for growth? So, I think too many businesses try and get off the ground without actually putting a plan in place.
Yeah.
And I think there's a misinterpretation in the SME world, that a business plan is for the bank manager, right? A business plan, it is. They think they need a business plan because they want to get a business loan, or they think they need a business plan because they want to get an investor. No, you need a business plan for yourself, because if you don't actually articulate to yourself what it is that you're doing with your business, how are you going to articulate it to other people? You're not, are you?
Exactly. Yeah.
And if your offering is as clear as mud, nobody else is going to get it either. So, I mean, the upshot is, if you don't make things clear to people in the world about what your offer actually is, they're not going to choose you, because there's going to be somebody else, your competitor, who is making it clear. So by knowing who you are, what you are, and even more importantly, who for.
Yeah.
You've got to know who your audience is. Who are you selling your product or service to? What makes them excited? What rings their bells? Because at the end of the day, this is all about people. Brand is all about people.
Yeah.
Because it's all about what people think of you, what people think of your product, what people think of your service. So ultimately, you need to know who the people are that you're planning to sell to, and where you can actually communicate with those people, where they hang out.
Yeah. I'm interested to know, if you had to put an approximate number on it, and obviously there won't be an approximate number, but if you had to just pick one, what percentage of SMEs that you've worked with would you say don't have a clear plan or a clear purpose in mind? Would you say that it's more than half of the business that you've worked with?
Hell yeah.
Okay.
I would actually say it's way higher than that, I'm afraid.
Really?
I reckon. I mean, I don't work with a huge number of small businesses and startups. I tend to work more with medium-sized companies. But if I come across a startup who've got the passion and the drive, and and they know what they want, that's exciting to me. I want to work with those guys, right?
Yeah.
But I would honestly say it's probably more like 90%, mate.
90%, yeah. And also, I would imagine the answer to this question is no, but I am interested to know if it's yes. Have you ever had to actually work with businesses on a plan for them? I mean, or do you just say, unless you have that, I'm not working with you on your branding? Like, how does that work?
Look, I don't do business planning, right? That's not my skill set.
Yeah.
So I would recommend them to somebody that does, is what I would do. I have plenty of business advisors in my network, so that's what I would do, is I would recommend them to an expert to help them with that, and then come back to me and I'll work with you to sort the branding.
Well, I'll also put your LinkedIn in the description, and we'll come to that at the end. But obviously, if people want to reach out to you for that, if that's the first step they need to take before they think about their branding, that could be really useful for them. So you touched on it briefly in your answer just now, but the word branding, okay, so let's think about what that really means, because it gets bandied around all the time. I often feel like it's misused or not understood correctly. So I'm curious to know, how do you interpret the terms branding and brand identity in the context of what you do?
Okay, so branding, it's a lot of things. That's the problem, right? And the problem is there has been so much writing on it. There's, you've only got to Google the term what is branding and you'll get 100 different answers, right? So let me break it down as simply as I possibly can. First and foremost, brand is the perception of what people think about your organization, right? It is everything that people believe about your organization, your service, your product, your people. Brand is every touch point of your business. Brand is customer experience. It really is your whole world, okay? But I mean, to break it down, it's your symbol, it's your reputation, it's your promise, the promise you make to your customers, the promise you make to your people, and it's experience. It's the experience that people have of your organization. That's probably the simplest way for me to define that. As far as brand identity is concerned, that's really easy. And I think there's a lot of confusion around brand identity. It used to be termed corporate identity a lot, but your brand identity is your visual and verbal identity. So everything that is visual and is verbal around your organization, that is your brand identity. So that encapsulates how you look, how you sound, right? So everything within that is your brand identity.
I'm really curious to know on this, and this is a follow-up question after what you just said there. Have you ever worked on like a brand DNA document or a brand DNA wheel? Because a creative director in an agency that I used to work at actually had a brand DNA wheel that had all the words on it about how this brand wanted to look and feel. And he did that for every client that we had. It was really cool, to be fair. Have you ever done anything like that? Or I guess my question is, how do you document all of that stuff that you just mentioned there?
I do something very similar, but that's part of my strategy process.
Yeah.
So when I work with a client, the process of working with a client on their brand is always brand discovery first.
Yeah.
And that is looking at the market, looking at the competitors, looking at where they sit, looking at their reputation if they already have one. Obviously with a startup, that's not so applicable. But you still need to do your homework in terms of the market, right? Then the next stage is brand strategy. Now, in the brand strategy process, I will pull out all of the information from the brand discovery phase, where I'm delving deep. I'm really getting under the skin of the business to find out all about them, what they're all about, what people think of them. And also in that stage with more established businesses, by that I mean companies that have already started, not startups, my process includes speaking to their customers, speaking to their team, speaking to people. And I actually find that the best information comes from that.
Yes.
And that will give me a lot of key facts that I then pull into the brand strategy document. Now, your brand strategy document is the basis for your brand identity. So what that will do is that will align the vision of the business and their business goals with the strategy for the brand. Okay. And that document will include, the mission, values, vision for the business, all of those good things.
That's awesome. Yeah, well, that's a very meticulous process, and that was one of my questions. I think we've actually covered that question there as well, because that's really good to know. So, okay, let's say then that I'm a small business owner. I've defined my offer, my point of difference, and my ideal customer, and now I want to get started on my branding. What are some of the key things that I need to know?
Okay, the first thing is not going to be cheap. What I say to people is, if you want cheap, off you fuck to Fiverr or Upwork, right? Because I'm not playing at this. When I'm helping somebody with their branding, I'm doing it with longevity in mind. And because it's done strategically, it's not just pretty pictures, it's not just about designing a nice logo. It's going to see them through for a good number of years before they're going to have to even think about doing a rebrand. And let's face it, everybody needs to do that at some point. You're not going to have the same brand identity forever, because every organization changes to move with the times.
Yeah.
So the first thing is, it's not going to be cheap, right? If you want cheap, off you go. The second thing is, it's going to take time. People come to me and they're like, we want a brand identity. Okay, great. Yeah. When do you need it by? Well, we need it, we need it in 2 weeks. No, not going to happen. Branding done properly isn't an overnight process, right? If you're going to do it right, you need to take time to make sure that every element is done to a degree that everyone's happy with. And the other thing is, branding, for me anyway, with my clients, it's a very inclusive process. So my clients need to be right on board and they need to work with me. Okay. It's a process that I like them to be involved in as much as possible. So, I need their cooperation, and it's in their interest for them to be, for them to participate in the process, because I'll deliver better results for them as a result of that. So time, money, getting the brief is good. Having an idea of the brief is really good. But in honesty, if you're doing the strategic process, that's fine, because I'll sort all of that anyway. And I normally will write the creative brief as part of the process, but I'll include the client in that process. So I'll write the brief and then I'll send the brief to them, and I expect and value their feedback, so that I know I'm on point with the direction for the creative.
I like the fact that you're not siloed, because that can happen quite a lot with a designer business relationship or a service provider client relationship, where you're working completely independently of one another and you're not aligned. And obviously then that leads to confusing creative and mixed messages. So I love what you said there about the collaborative aspect. Would you say that's the biggest part of your working relationship with clients? Is that the thing that you're biggest on? I know you mentioned about money and about patience and all those things, which are really important. But I guess if you had to look at those three in isolation, do you have a preference, or are they all equally important to you?
I think that actually the participation of the client is really, really important to me. I run I run cloud project management software as well, so that my clients are always in the picture. They always know what's going on. Look, I don't work in isolation, right? I have a huge team of, it's a community that I've built. I actually call it the Community Branding Initiative.
Yeah.
And that includes people from all walks of creative life that I call upon to support me with branding projects. And by doing everything in using software, every part of the project is there and it's visible and completely transparent for the client to see at all times, right? So provided they're willing to use the software, because I've had clients that aren't, provided they're willing to actually log in and have a look, they really don't need to do very much. I make it very easy for them to know what's going on.
What on that point, what are some of the most common obstacles that you've had when you've worked with any businesses? It doesn't necessarily just need to be small businesses, but you said that in the past, maybe some clients have objected to using software like that, or they're maybe not as collaborative as you would have liked. I mean, what are some others? Like, what are some other objections or hurdles that you've had to overcome in your time as a designer? I know that's quite a loaded question, but if you had to, yeah, like what do you find are the most common obstacles? I guess for the benefit of people watching, in case they might be the type to do this kind of thing, or hopefully not. But I'm just curious to know basically what you found.
I think the biggest frustration for designers in general is waiting to hear back from clients.
Yeah.
Because I know myself, I will schedule a timeline for a project and I'll put in key dates for the deliverables.
Yeah.
I'll deliver those things and then I'll hear nothing.
Yeah.
And I'm having to chase the client. I know that's a common frustration for designers, is that we're waiting to hear. We just want to get on with the project for them, but we're at a point where we really need the input of the client. The thing is, people are busy, right? People are busy. I try and make it as easy as possible for people to feed back by doing absolutely everything online. They see proofs online, they can comment on everything online, everything gets uploaded to the project management software. So there's one point of contact and the communication is really clear. So you don't get email chain, you're not having to search through email chains to find information. It's all in one place. So I think I couldn't do more than I'm doing, really. I'm making it as easy as I possibly can for my client to put back. And, I'll chase if I need to, but I prefer not to. I prefer not to have to do that. Because, if people aren't responding, it's usually just because they're very busy.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it is. I mean, yeah, I think every creative feels your pain on that one. Things like project management tools are something I've not really used before, but I definitely should, because I see them advertised.
I'm going to recommend you mine. I'll send you a link after.
Yeah, and I'll put it in the description as well. So, okay, here's another loaded question for you. Is there such a thing as good or bad branding? And what are some of the things that you advise businesses to either go for or avoid?
Yes, there are. Yes, there are. I try not to hop on the bandwagon of slagging off other people's brands, because that's not really very fair. Because you don't know the history behind it, okay? And quite often it might be that a company has made decisions, hasn't involved a designer, or the brief, you haven't seen the brief that the designer's been given, right? So you don't know what that company is. They're steering their designer in a particular direction, whatever. There's a lot of bad branding out there. And I think the biggest problem with branding is inconsistency, with smaller companies particularly, where they're perhaps not using a designer and they're trying to do everything themselves and they're cobbling things together in Canva or whatever. There's a danger that everything ends up looking different, and then message is disseminated and it becomes foggy as to what they're doing. So what they're doing is actually working against themselves rather than for. So clarity is so important. You you've got to keep that purpose and that vision for the business in mind, and you've got to make sure every time you're presenting your business, that's always front of mind. It's always clear what you do and who you do it for.
Yeah.
And I think you could look at a lot of stuff online and not really know what it is that people actually do because they're not clear about it. And so my mission is to make everybody that I work with is to make everything clear. So whatever they do, people know what it is that they do and who for.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And speaking of being clear, I'm aware that my screen currently looks like I'm on a 1980s VHS player. Well, certainly it does for me. So for the rest of this podcast, if it still looks like I'm on a 1980s VHS player, just everybody look at Claire. Don't look at me. Everyone look at Claire. Anyway, the technical hitches you come up against when you do these, fucking hell. So I had the question down about the process, like what it looks like when you're helping businesses to rebrand and how you help them. I feel like you've covered this mostly. Yeah. Is there anything else you want to add there that you might not have said before, or anything you think the audience might want to know?
I think we pretty much covered it, didn't we?
Yeah.
No, I don't think we did actually. Let me touch back on the process a little minute.
Yeah.
So my process really depends on the size of the organisation and whether they're a new organisation, a startup, or whether it's an existing company looking for a rebrand. For a startup, the process is so much simpler because you haven't got that history. Okay, you haven't got the brand reputation that already exists, what people think about the brand, customer perception, all of that. You're not dealing with any of that. You're starting from a clean slate.
Yeah.
So with a larger organisation that's rebranding, I will always do a very thorough discovery process followed by a workshop where I'll bring in the key stakeholders in the business, and I'll do a workshop with them, which is a really good laugh. I've designed it myself so that it's not stuffy or formal anyway. There's no PowerPoint in sight. It's just it's a bunch of really fun exercises, which help me to get to what are the values of the company, what is their mission, what do they believe, all of that great stuff all comes from the workshop. And then the strategy comes from that. And then it will be the creative brief, which will then form the brand identity. And then the next thing is brand building. So you've got to build the brand. And it's like building blocks, Obviously, the obvious things that people think about is they've got to have a website, they've got to have social media accounts, they've got to have this, that, and next thing. The thing that I try and focus startups on is don't think you've got to do all of that straight away, because actually, as a startup, what you need to be concentrating on more than anything is where your audience hanging out, right? Because if your audience is on LinkedIn, why are you doing shit on Facebook? They're not there.
Yeah.
I can actually think of a client who I recently did some rebranding work with, and they committed, in my opinion, the cardinal sin, because what they were doing was they were replicating their content across all channels. So everything they post on LinkedIn also gets posted on Facebook, but they don't have an audience on Facebook.
Yeah.
So they're wasting their fucking time because nobody's looking at it, let alone engaging with it.
Yeah.
So it's really important for startups to know where their audience is so that they can actually put themselves in that place. Yeah. And I know, I know startup companies, I've worked with startup companies that I haven't, I've said, you don't need a website. Your audience is on Facebook.
Yes.
Just do Facebook.
Don't
spend money on a website if your audience is on Facebook. And, a lot of people would shoot me down for that. But if it's not going to bring you business, don't spend money on it. I'm all about, particularly with startups, don't spend money you haven't got. Yeah, spend the money you've got wisely on things that are going to actually bring revenue, because there's no point otherwise.
That's what I like the most about you, Claire, is your sincerity and transparency, because a lot of designers, and this is not to slate the profession, but there will be designers out there who would just take the money, do the branding. It might not be applicable to that business or where their audience hangs out, but they just want to get the work in. Whereas you're really honest with people, and I think they will respect you so much more for that. And I imagine that's probably been, a lot more successful for you in terms of getting the work and building those relationships than just kind of being dishonest and going, yeah, fine, I can put a few banners together for you, and it not really going anywhere.
Look, I've never been any other way, because this is just me, right? And when people deal with my business, they're dealing with me.
Yeah.
And my values are honesty and transparency.
Yeah.
Everything in my business is hinged around that. So I tell my clients as it is. I don't bullshit them. I don't get them to spend money they don't need to spend. It's as simple as that. I will advise them. I can't tell them what to do. If they choose to ignore that advice, that's their prerogative.
Of course, yeah.
But as far as I'm concerned, there's just no other way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I think the thing is, I'm not just a designer, right?
Mm.
Because just a designer is the person that sits in front of a Mac and produces design work, right?
Yeah.
I'm way more than that. And without blowing my own trumpet, I'm a branding consultant. So I help people with their brand as an entirety, not just the pretty logo.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do the logos, but the logo is part of a much bigger picture.
Of course it is. And when you refer to yourself as a branding consultant, it makes me think of another question. And I didn't ask this at the start, actually. When you talked about going to Croydon College and the kind of the history that's got and what you would have learned there and what you would have learned ever since. I mean, is there anyone that you've taken inspiration from along the way, or anyone that you really looked up to, or any kind of like guiding principles that you live and die by? I'm really curious to know that, because I imagine that you've learned a lot over the last 20 or 30 years. And I think the audience would be really interested to know as well, kind of where your inspiration comes from for what you do.
I've had so many great influences. Lots of people that I've worked with, creative directors that I've had that have taught me huge amounts. Because back in the day, the agency model was very nurturing. It was a very nurturing environment for young creatives. So you'd come into an agency as a junior, and you'd have your middleweight designer, your senior designer, your creative director. And the more senior people would nurture the younger people. So I've had a lot of really good advice. I was very fortunate to have great creative directors, great agency owners that I worked for. But I think a lot of it is just life. It's life experience.
Yeah.
Because I've worked across so many different types of business. There's pretty much no area of business that I haven't worked in. And that's what I love about that is when I do a branding project for a client, I have to get under the skin of their business, and I have to learn everything about what it is that they do. And that for me is the best part of being a designer, being a creative, is every time you work with a different type of business, you learn that business and what that business does.
Yeah.
And that for me is hugely inspiring, as are some of the clients that I work with. One of my clients is a construction company who have the most incredible community spirit.
Yeah.
And they work with young people, bringing young people into the industry. They do things to help people in the community. They do so much to give back. And I would say that is probably the thing that inspires me more than anything, is working with people like that.
Yeah.
Because they're the kind of people that I want to work with. They're good people.
you've used the word community a few times on this podcast, and that's amazing that you see it that way, because I feel like, you know, with any service provider client relationship, there is an element of I don't want to say they're the boss, but I think a lot of people see it that way, whereas you see it very much as a kind of collaborative, equitable process, if that's the word. So yeah, I really like what you've said throughout this podcast about the idea that, well, okay, yes, they're helping you by giving you the work, but you're giving them just as much help by defining their branding, which is a really fucking difficult thing to do. You know, so that's awesome that you've referred to that a few times. I mean, on that point, actually, what's a rebrand project that you're particularly proud of, and why? So I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here, but I really want to find out what, you know, yeah, I guess what project what you're most proud of. I'm just repeating the exact same question again, but I'm thinking, like, you know, a startup project in particular, you know, as that's the focus of this podcast. Is there any one project or handful of projects that stand out to you?
Well, first up, you've shot yourself in the foot there, Neil, because you wouldn't be rebranding a startup because they're a startup.
Yeah, exactly. Let's say not a startup, whatever the opposite is.
Yeah, so a non-startup. There's a really good case study on my website, actually. I don't mind banging on about these guys because they're actually one of my favourite clients. And they're the one that I just talked about, and their name is Progressive. And when they came to, they're actually a big company, and when they came to me, they didn't have a clue what they were for, what they stood for, where they, you know, they had some ideas about where they were going, but they knew, you know, they knew they needed to rebrand because there was a new board of directors coming in to take over, and they basically worked their way up through the ranks of the business. So these guys have been with the company since man and boy. And what I love about them is that they're a business that really gives a shit, and they give a shit about their people. And that's so obvious because the people in the company have been there forever. There's no staff turnover, you know, it's practically non-existent. And that inspires me, working with people like that. So when they came to me for a rebrand, I jumped at the chance to work with them. And the project was a big project. It went on for quite a long period of time because I did the entire process with them. So brand discovery, strategy, workshop, yeah, the whole thing. And that culminated in a new website at the very end of the project. But I did, yeah, everything from their brand identity to their web, you know, their physical, you know, vehicle liveries and everything. And that's a project that I'm really proud of because they're proud of it. Yeah. And that to me is the most satisfying thing about what I do, because I am only here to help people, right? I get the most satisfaction from delivering a rebrand because it delivers results for my clients. And if my clients happen to be good people, they happen to be nice people, and they're doing good things, that's great. That makes me feel pretty damn good about stuff. Yeah. And that, you know, that rebrand has brought them a 21% increase on their turnover. So, you know, let's not be shy here. What I do delivers results. People make money from what I do.
Yeah.
So, but they've got an image that they're really happy with. They've got a tone of voice that sounds like them and feels like them. And yeah, it's happy days. So yeah, anyone can see that on my website. And there's testimonials from them singing my praises.
That's great. It's amazing when you can quantify the work that you've done as well, because I think sometimes with, you know, with people in creative industries, it can be really tough to find out what the direct ROI of something is. And, you know, when you can reel off numbers like that, you know, big numbers, then it's amazing. You know,
I know with all of my clients because I make sure that I find out.
yeah,
It's not difficult to do. It's just about communicating, you know, just speaking to them and finding out.
Yeah, I feel like not enough people do that. That's a really, key part of your service. Obviously, that I guess it's the aftercare, isn't it? You don't just do the work and bugger off. You go back to them and you want to know what the impact has been, and that'll make them feel good as well, because they'll feel like you're as invested in their businesses as they are.
Yeah.
Which is
Well, I am, because at the end of the day, I'm only as good as my last project.
Yeah.
If there is no point me doing this if I don't deliver results. So every project that I do is with results in mind.
Yeah.
And by, if I can align the business properly, we're going to get those results. Simple as that.
Brilliant. Well, that's a great place to end it, Claire. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast and giving me such wonderful insights. Where can people find you if they want to connect or ask you any questions?
Okay, so I'm everywhere. I'm on LinkedIn. Just Claire Baker will find me. Baker Brand is my business, bakerbrand.co.uk, and I'm not really doing an awful lot else at the moment. Most of my effort is focused around my website and my LinkedIn account.
Brilliant. And I'll put the link to your blog in the description as well.
Okay, cool.
But for now, I'm off to go and watch a 1980s video on a VHS player. Every bit as clear, if not clearer, than my picture has been for the last 25 minutes. So, yeah, thank you once again for coming on, Claire. And, yeah, we'll catch up.
Welcome. Cheers. That's it. I've popped my cherry now.
Well done, you.